That has always been my belief.
I know, I remember because I was in 2 of your classes.
I remember. Shall I tell you the classes?
Yes, please.
You did a core course called OB1.
Yes.
Then you did an elective called PGL with me.
Oh, Professor, that is so correct. And today, I actually may even draw from that class because that class is the one which sort of set the spark for what I'm going to talk about today. All this whole field, which has blossomed like anything in the last 3 decades. It is all comes from, that's the origin, correct?
See, what else a teacher wants? Teacher is the only profession where you take credit for others' success.
Yeah.
So teaching is the only profession where the individual will take the credit for the student's success, though he or she did not have much role to play. You see lots of noises. What are those noises? Somebody's mic is on, he's talking on the phone. Yeah, now it's gone. And a good teacher is a teacher who learns how to remain silent. So I'm going silent.
Thank you, Professor Ravi Kumar, for joining the session today. It's a great to, it's a great to see you joining the session.
How can I remember Hema. I remember Hema's classmates, Radha Chandrasekhar and Mala Murthy. Then you have YV, LVS. And in your other section, you had Shekhar Gupta. I don't know if you remember. I remember most of them. I mean, I don't know whether they remember me or not, but I can understand 30 teachers teaching in 2 years. But that's fine with me. Yeah. It's fine if I've forgotten, but if people remember what they learned from me, not what I taught, what they've learned from me, I think that makes my day. I'm going mute.
You know, during in my presentation this evening, I will be referring to some of the things I learned in your class because it has got so much applicability, so much.
Who is there from IIM side? Sushma is there?
Yes, sir. Sushma here, sir. Yeah.
Sushma, see whether you can record all of it, if in case.
Yes, sir. It's been recording, sir. It's already.
No, not the cough. We can edit it later.
Sorry. No, yeah, we have been recording. Yeah.
No, I was in hurry to finish what I'm cooking. So I did not want to. I saw Hema talking. Tell me when I'm ready. I'll be ready with my PowerPoint presentation. I went and munched something and came.
Okay.
So
okay.
Eating at hurry is not advisable.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Pleasure. We have 82 people. Fantastic.
Yes, sir.
Better attendance than classes in IIM Bangalore.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We have 82 participants. I hope all of you can hear my voice. It's Sushma here, joined from IIM Bangalore Alumni Office. As you all know, today's topic of the session is, today we have with us Ms. Hema Krishnan, Dr. Hema Krishnan. She's an alumna of IMB PGP 1988, and she's a professor of strategy and global business in Xavier University in Cincinnati. And she's also an alumna of IIT Bangalore and also University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and she's a chair of board of trustees for Staunin International, a non-profit institution involved in healthcare for rural Africa. She was employed in a petroleum company in India before leaving for the USA in 1989 to pursue her PhD. Her publications in the areas of M&A, top management teams, teaching pedagogy, and healthcare policy appear in the premier Journal of Business. I feel it's my privilege, and I'm very happy to ma'am for accepting to present this webinar to all of us. And I can see, I think 85 participants are all looking forward to your session. And a warm welcome, ma'am, once again. And yeah, over to you, ma'am. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
thank you very much, Sushma, and thank you to the IIM Alumni Office for organizing this webinar. And it is a real privilege for me to be here this evening for you and morning for my US friends. And as I was mentioning to Professor Ravi Kumar, it is a great privilege, to present at a place where you have your professor from your MBA days, and you also have wonderful students, who were in my classes. It is so wonderful because I consider these groups of individuals, professors and students, to be my greatest teachers. So I'm really very honored to, to see you here this morning, evening. And so this topic is, Sushma, I can share my screen now. Do I have the privileges?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, you can share. Yeah.
Wonderful. And you have to tell me once the screen gets,
yes,
can you see?
Okay, yes, ma'am, I can see. I can.
You can see my screen. Okay, but the strange thing is, I don't know where my screen, I cannot see it myself. So 1 second, let me get back to that screen. I don't know where it disappeared. Desktop. For some reason, I'm not able to, this is the first time it's doing this. I think I'll go back to the file again. Maybe then it will be better. Can you see the screen, everybody?
Ma'am, we can see the screen. I think you're trying to load a PPT, I think. Yeah, we can see the PPT.
Yes, madam, visible. It is visible.
Yeah, it is okay. It's because I think it was trying to load it. You're correct. Thank you. Yeah, so it was because it was, yeah, it is quite a, like with all the pictures.
May I request you to go to full screen, please?
Yeah, I'm going to do full screen. Can you all see now?
No, there'll be a lag. No, it's still not full screen.
Yeah, ma'am, it's still not.
It's done. Done. Thank you.
Good.
Okay, it's all good now, Sushma and other friends?
Yes, ma'am, it's fine.
Yes, madam, fine.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. And I apologize for this, causing this slight delay. So the topic for this evening is called Strategic Leadership, Integrating Mindfulness in Organizations. Upfront, I would like to mention that because we have so many participants today, I'm sure that many of you are probably practicing mindfulness or have been practicing meditation for a long time. So if I make any errors, I would like to apologize upfront, because more than a practitioner of meditation or mindfulness, I consider myself to be an observer of life, just life's journey. And what I'm presenting this evening is basically my recordings in terms of what I have observed in life, what I have tried to implement in life, and what my institution has done to integrate mindfulness, the university where I am teaching. So upfront, I would like to, just seek your apology if I'm making mistakes, which I'm quite sure I will. Strategic leadership, integrating mindfulness in organizations. Here is a quick look at the agenda. I'm going to start by looking at leadership, strategic leadership, and how it helps in institutions in establishing a competitive advantage for themselves. The second point I will cover is how mindfulness can be seen as a strategy in an organization or in an institution's toolkit as a source of sustainable competitive advantage. Point number 3, we are going to examine how do we implement mindfulness if it is going to be a strategy, just like any other strategy, like total quality management, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and so on. How do we go about implementing mindfulness as a strategy in institutions? We will then do the breakout groups and discussion and close with implementation challenges. Anytime you want, you may please stop me, because in fact, I would encourage you to stop me. I know my phone keeps ringing like, I don't know for what reason. I apologize for that. So if you stop me, only then I will know whether you're able to hear me. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking. several years ago, this goes back to the year 2011 or 2012, I was asked to teach a class called Strategic Leadership for the Executive MBA students here in Xavier University, Cincinnati. I have to mention that I had never taught a leadership class earlier. The only classes I used to teach before were the capstone strategy class and global business classes. I was very concerned about teaching this class because I was a zero in teaching leadership. So my associate dean at that time told me that you can design this class the way you want. You don't have to look at how it was done in the previous years. You just can teach it just the way you want. So given the green signal from my associate dean at that time, I explored various textbooks and they were all falling short for various reasons. But around that time, I came across a very, very slim book. It's a very small book, very tiny book. And it was called The Leader's Checklist by Wharton School professor Michael Useem. Because I'm hopelessly left-brained and very data-driven, I liked this book because number one, it was extremely short. So I could finish reading very quickly. And number two, this guy, Michael Useem, had laid out those principles in like a laundry list of 1, 2, 3, 4 bullet style, 15 points. And I really liked that because I didn't want to spend too much time reading a very thick book. So these were the two reasons, for actually going with this book. But I also liked the title and what the book had to offer. This is what Michael Useem said. This is this laundry list of the 15 leadership principles. I'm not going to go over all these leadership principles because that's not really the purpose of our talk this evening. But I would like to highlight 3 points here. And one of the points has been repeated for several reasons. Out of the 15 leadership principles, we are familiar with the motivation, the communication, the vision, the strategic thinking, and so on. The 3 points I would like to highlight are, and the point I really liked, it was called honor the room. Until that point in time, there were very few leadership books which really talked about honoring the room. What does honoring the room mean? Honoring the room means we treat everybody with the highest levels of respect. If you are at the workplace, perhaps it is the person who brings your coffee. If you're, I don't know how, India has probably changed now. This is from my olden days when I worked in the petroleum company. Or in the evening when everybody is finished working and they've all gone home. The custodial services come late in the evening. They clean our rooms, they clean our trash cans, and then they go home, long after we all have left our office place. Do we even know who these people are? If we see them in the hallway, let us say that I'm working very late on one of the evenings, and these people are walking on the hallway, trying to clean all these office rooms and clear the trash cans. Do we know who these people are? Do we know anything about their families? Do we know what their aspirations for their lives are? What they want to accomplish in life? My answer is most likely no. We go for trade conferences. We go to these like academy meetings. And everywhere I go, I find that people are looking only at our name badge to see where we are from. Is she or he from one of those Ivy League universities? Is he or she a great professor, a great researcher, an editor of a journal, and so on? So they want to go and like shake hands with such individuals so that they can come up in their career. But when we go to these meetings and we are sitting at those round tables where we are having our lunch at these very large conference halls, that person who's standing in his or her uniform, who's serving us our lunch, who's pouring coffee into our cups, do we even see their name badges to see who this individual is, who's going to clear up the plates after we are done? I bet most of us don't, because we are so busy looking at all the people who are better than us on that ladder to success, that we have forgotten who these people are, or we are not even interested. According to Michael Useem, going back to strategic leadership, and that is why I have placed it twice on my slide. Honor the room. Treat everybody with those highest and those equal levels of respect. Life is very short, folks. Today, I have a professor, who taught me more than 30 years ago. And today I'm in the last innings of my career. So all those people I tried to befriend, so that I could come up in my career, all that is meaningless today as I'm in my final innings of my career. Because all that is going to matter is, was I an honest individual? Was I a caring individual? Was I a compassionate individual? That is all that is going to matter now in the final stage of my career. So for those of you who are in your early stages of your career, if you start practicing, honoring the room, treating everybody with the highest levels of respect, it is going to be reaping, you are going to be really getting the benefit, and you're going to get a huge return on that investment. Two other points mentioned by Michael Useem: convey your character. Please, conveying your character, it's the most important thing. Without character, leadership is meaningless. We don't even want to talk about the rest of the leadership traits because it's meaningless if we don't convey our character. Placing common interest first is the other third important variable I wanted to emphasize. It is not about me. It is not about me. It is about the interest of the team, the interest of the organization. This is another thing I would like to emphasize. And all the other points are just exactly what you find in all the leadership textbooks. It's very important, agreed. But these three principles are also very important. And they're especially important when organizations are undergoing a crisis. In fact, this book was published around the time that there were two major crises. The BP petroleum company, there was a massive oil spill. Millions and millions of, ocean floors and so on were affected. So many birds and animals were destroyed, were killed because of that huge oil spill on the oceans. At the same time, in the southern part, in the southern hemisphere, in South America, there was a mining crisis where 33 mine workers were trapped in a mine in Chile, South America, and all of them were able to survive, and they were able to come out without, no one died, because the leaders who took care of these problems, they addressed that particular issue, the mining crisis, they did these three things. They honored the room, they placed common interests first, and they conveyed their character, in addition to the 12 other points. And today we are at a crisis, folks. Today we are at a crisis because of the global pandemic. Some industries, agreed, are doing better, but eventually it is going to influence all the industries. So today, as the world is undergoing this very big global pandemic, it is very important for organizations to institute new types of strategies. So when I look at the previous list, folks, all those 15 principles, there is one common theme. The common theme is that an organization's competitive advantage is not going to come from total quality management. It is not going to come from artificial intelligence. It is not going to come from Internet of Things, how many patents you have and so on. Those are important. But above all, the overarching framework is that it is the human capital, the intellectual capital. How efficient an organization is in building human capital, or as we can call it as intellectual capital, across all the levels in an organization is what is the source of competitive advantage. So the question is, what kind of strategy can we adopt for this new age, the 21st century? There is something which has been done very successfully in many organizations, and this is called mindfulness. If organizations can establish a culture of mindfulness, this will help them to build human capital. Human capital is long lasting. It lasts longer than total quality management. It lasts longer than supply chain management and all the other business strategies. So if organizations can create a culture of mindfulness, it is likely to result in a better harness of human and intellectual capital, which in turn will result in a sustainable competitive advantage. So this is why I've chosen mindfulness as a topic and as an important strategy for sustainable competitive advantage. What is mindfulness? I have to say, like even today, there is so much confusion. Mindfulness, meditation, there is all this, it's used very interchangeably. So I went back to those very old Buddhist texts. And because I cannot read Pali, and all I can read is only the English translation. So these are some of the English translations of a concept which has been around for 2,500 years. According to the American Psychological Association, mindfulness is a moment-to-moment awareness of one's experience without judgment. If you go to the bottom of the screen, there are two things mentioned here in connection with mindfulness. It is a state that you can promote by something called an awareness meditation. That means just a detached observation of passing thoughts and events. And detached observation means that we are not really judging them. I mean, think about the big blue sky. If it is a perfect sky with no cloud, that, according to Buddhist texts, is what our inherent mind is. For all of us, we are actually blessed with something which is a completely sparkling blue sky with no cloud. This is our perfect being. But as a human being, we are not like that. Our sky is full of thunder, right? It is all these dark clouds all the time. They take roots. They don't even leave. They are there constantly bothering us and affecting our life. So this is what most of us, our life is all about, a sky which is ridden with all these dark clouds. But if we can somehow train our mind to look at those clouds and look at our mind as something which is just passing and which is not going to stay forever, it will be better for us. We can maybe lead a better life. And in the process, we can have a better team. When we can lead a better team, we can be a better team player. And in the process, maybe it can be a better organization. The pictures you see here, it's from my complex where I live. And it is full of Canadian geese. And that the creature which looks different from the Canadian geese is called a farm goose. And this farm goose is the only farm goose we have here. All the other birds are all Canadian geese. And I observe them every day when I walk because they are just idling. They have nothing to do, just standing and observing. That's all they do. So, and I also have some very nice pictures of them relaxing and taking a nap whenever they want. So that is my North Star. Whenever I get really concerned, very agitated and very anxious, and if I'm in a position to take a walk, I make sure I take a walk and see these birds because it just settles me. So mindfulness is just that awareness and observation of your thoughts without really seriously paying attention to them. How is it different from meditation? Meditation is only a tool to cultivate mindfulness. And I was looking for a good definition for the difference between the two. Mindfulness is considered to be a quality of your mind. It's a quality of mind. Whereas meditation is a tool. It's just a tool. It's a practice so that you can cultivate a mindful mind. Then the question is, should you meditate to be mindful? The answer is no. Right now, our 80 odd participants, you're all here listening to my monologue. I'm the one talking, you're listening. And I don't know at what point you have mentally switched off. But even those moments when you did not switch off mentally, but were actually listening to me, you were actually being mindful. So you were not meditating, but you were being mindful. Because here is this person, on the other end of the screen, and who's talking something about some vague thing about leadership was mentioned, something about mindful was mentioned. So even if you heard only these two words, leadership and mindfulness, that time you were being mindful. And that's the difference between being mindful and actually sitting in cross-legged position and doing meditation. And that is much more complex. So all we are trying to do here, folks, is just mindfulness. We are not asking anybody to do meditation. What mindfulness is not, it is not that clear blue sky. It's not. If we are even trying to get to that stage where we do not want thoughts and where we are forcing the thoughts out, it is very dangerous. As a human being, we are not in a position to have this clear blue sky in our mind where we do not have thoughts. And we should not force ourselves to do that. Mindfulness is not blank, focusing, like terribly on something that we are forcing other thoughts away. Don't force the thoughts away. Let the thoughts come and let the thoughts go. If you're stuck on a thought, it's completely okay. Don't judge yourself, because we are human beings. Sometimes we get agitated and we are stuck on a thought. It's completely okay. So that is what I want to mention. I want to caution. So now we go to the, like, how is it going to be affecting us in the business world? Sushma, I would, because I switched off my cell phone, at some point, you may have to stop me if I'm going, like way beyond the time and so on. And it is, I leave it to you, okay?
Yeah, ma'am, sure, yeah.
Yeah, because, yeah, thank you. How did mindfulness enter the corporate world? Friends, as I mentioned earlier, the word is very, very old. It is called Sati, S-A-T-I, which is a Pali word from the Buddhist texts, 2,500 years old, which the simplest translation is called mindfulness. So all the time, from 2,500 years ago, from the time that mindfulness was used, like as part of, like how meditation was used to cultivate a mindful mind, then for centuries, it has been kept alive in many Eastern traditions. Many Eastern traditions have used, like continued to keep it alive. And also, interestingly, mindfulness is also there in the other religions. If we think that it is a religious thing, I just want to mention this is not a religious exercise at all. It is just a spiritual thing which has existed in all the major religions of the world. You take any religious text, you can take, like the Bible, you can take the Quran, you can take the Bhagavad Gita, and you can take, the book of Torah, anything you take, everywhere, training the mind, and to be mindful is part of every scripture. It's a part of every spiritual tradition. So it is used and it is nothing new. But it did enter the corporate world much, much later, much later. And this was only a few decades ago. In the mid 1950s, after we went through this the last 100 years, look at the source of competitive advantage for organizations. First, it was, possessing land. Then it was possessing labor. Then it was capital. And then until 20 years ago, it was information technology. We felt that having information technology will be a source of sustainable competitive advantage. But now we know it is the human capital and the intellectual capital, which is the source of sustainable competitive advantage. So about 30, 40 years ago, in spite of all the Western, especially in the Western world, where people started having a lot, soon they went into into mass consumption. Marketing became a very, very popular discipline. People started having, all these gadgets. In the United States, especially, every house had a car. Every house had a refrigerator. This was more than 40, 50 years ago. All these gadgets, made their appearance in the Western world. But something that people found was they were still not happy. They were really still not happy. And around that same time that mass consumption increased and people's standard of living started to increase, a very disturbing trend was noticed. And that disturbing trend was that people's anxiety and stress levels started to increase. Huge stress and anxiety. And that's the time that 30, 40 years ago that psychologists started looking into the human mind. But all that the psychologists did those days, 30, 40 years ago, was they only observed human behavior. We just observed human behavior and we said, this is what the brain is, this is what it is doing. but this is just the behavior. And so we need to work with this kind of a behavior. It was much later, and it started with some of the very, very famous social psychologists like Jon Kabat-Zinn and so on, who felt that it is not enough to just observe the human mind. Can we train the human mind? Can we train the human mind so that we can start making some changes in the way this person is going to be behaving at the workplace and also in the home, in the personal setting. So that is where this whole mindfulness concept entered the field of cognitive and social psychology, that we are just not just blessed with a brain, that it is just that we behave in this fashion, but maybe we can be, the way of thinking can be changed at any age or any stage in our life. 1970s. So Jon Kabat-Zinn, mainly, from the neuroscience, the psychology perspective. And around the time in the late 1970s and 80s, there was an Ellen Langer, who was considered to be the mother of the management discipline, especially with regard to introducing mindfulness in the corporate world. So it is just not for physiological or psychological benefits, but these people actually can be trained so that they will be functioning better at their workplace. And also it can be used as a tool to improve our leadership skills. Around the same time, neuroscience and medicine. So 40, 50 years ago, many Westerners, they were not very happy with their life, although they had everything. They all made a beeline for the Eastern world. They went to Burma, they went to India, and I think, these were some of, and Thailand and so on, where Buddhism and mindfulness was still practiced, and they were still practiced and, sort of handed over from generation after the generation. So what elements of Buddhism and the spiritual practice they could take, that was the meditation and the mindfulness. And many of them had the privilege of also meeting with this excellency, the Dalai Lama in Dharmashala. And when they saw the Tibetan monks and they saw other monks, and they felt that their behavior was really very different from the regular, from other human beings. And when they sat with them and they did these retreats with them, what they learned, these Westerners who were zero training, all they had is that they had all these fancy degrees from the Ivy League universities of United States and some of the, other Western countries in Europe. Not that you just have a brain and that we behave in a certain fashion, but that we can change our way of thinking, and that there could potentially be some physiological health benefits. So His Excellency, the Dalai Lama, gave permission for many of those monks who were all established in Dharamshala in India to make a trip. And that was the first time these monks, Buddhist monks, were traveling all the way to the United States to go to a laboratory to undergo these, what we call the fMRIs, the brain scans, to see why they were different from all of us. And is there really a physiological difference? The answer was yes. Mindfulness training over a period of time can actually result in such changes in the brain that it can have an impact on our health as well. So in the last 30 years, there is a huge amount of research which has proven beyond doubt that mindfulness, regular practice of mindfulness, can not only have a positive impact on our psychological dimension, it can also have a positive impact on the physiological dimension. And now in Massachusetts, in Wisconsin, many of the doctors, medical doctors, did these studies along with some of the along with the psychologists. So what are the main findings with regard to the company's performance? I'm going to start with the bottom left-hand side, because it is from there that it cascades up to the organization. Regular practice of mindfulness has got a very big impact in the team performance. If you're a part of a team, it is going to basically, result in some qualitative improvements, because you're going to be a better team player. You are going to be better at conflict management. You are going to be, you won't respond very quickly to very troubling situations. You're going to first think before you say something, and so on. So these slow qualitative improvements, which actually come from your having better listening skills, being a better team player, and so on, it goes to the next stage in the left-hand side. Because you're going to be a better team player and you're going to improve your stress levels and reduce your anxiety level, you are more likely to actually stay on in the organization. So organizations are finding that there was less employee turnover. And by turnover, we mean, because turnover is used differently in some different countries, by turnover, we mean that, for my folks, the turnover means that you're still staying in the organization. You're not leaving the organization. You're going to be in the organization for a long time. You're not going to quit because your stress levels are lower. There is a better atmosphere. You are a better team player. You handle conflict better. So if you're not going to leave the organization, it is also going to be impacting the organization's financial performance, because every time people leave the company, it's a big expense for the organization, right? You've got to hire new people, you've got to train new people, and then that is an expense. So it adversely impacts, it increases your expenses, and consequently, it reduces your profitability. At the same time, if your employees are feeling happy, less stressed, less anxious, and better at conflict management, their health also starts to improve. And especially in the Western world here in United States, healthcare costs are huge, massive. US spends more per capita, on healthcare than any other nation does in the world. Yet, look at the COVID-19 situation now. They say that 280,000 people in a country with a population of 350 million, which is one of the largest countries in the world, people are spread out. We are not living in cramped quarters. Yet 260, 270, 280,000 people have already died. And it is just starting now because with the onset of winter. Why? We are spending so much per capita on healthcare, #1 in the world. Yet, our expenses are huge. It may not have anything to do with mindfulness, but what I'm trying to say is it's a huge expense for organizations and institutions. That is why mindfulness can potentially be a very good strategy in your toolkit, whether you're an educational institution or you're in the business world. Whether you're starting in your career, you're in your midterm in your career or late in your career, it is really very good to just think about mindfulness as a possible strategy. The right-hand side column, at the individual level, 2 types of benefits: psychological, as I mentioned, and we will discuss some of these points in greater detail, and physiological, reduce stress, better energy, and so on. The reach of mindfulness, just to summarize what I mentioned earlier, the last 30, 40 years, huge amounts of research. It is in government institutions. It is practiced in private institutions. It is practiced in the public sector in India and in other countries. It is practiced in the profit sector in India, in United States, and in other parts of the world. It is practiced in non-profit institutions. It is practiced everywhere. It is practiced in educational institutions. It is practiced in the healthcare institutions. It is practiced in the high-tech world, especially with companies like Google and to university settings. It is practiced in the defense sector, the US defense sector. It says my internet connection is unstable, so hopefully I'm okay, So anytime if it's not, just let me know, please. I always worry about the internet connection. Anyway, everywhere it is practiced. I want to give it, because many of our friends are now have tuned in from India. I would like to give an example of how it is practiced and how it made a change in one of the Indian institutions. Ms. Kiran Bedi, I think she's the Lieutenant Governor of Pondicherry. I may be mistaken, but she also served as you know, she was one of the first IPS female police officers way back many decades ago. One of her, and she has had a glorious career. One of her career roles was when she was the superintendent of the Tihar jail in Delhi. Can you imagine, people who are hardened criminals, do you think there is any scope to reform them? Unfortunately, most nations think that there is no way we can reform. I'll just see the chat, just to see if somebody is having a problem. Just let me know because I'm worried for. I think whether my internet connection is not stable. Anyway, hopefully somebody will let me know. So going back, with the Tihar jail, Kiran Bedi, during her tenure there, and she found very, very positive results. In fact, one of the reasons she was awarded the Magsaysay Award for international peace about 30 years or 35 years ago is because of her contributions to reforming hardened criminals in Tihar jail in Delhi by using the practice of mindfulness, by implementing the practice of mindfulness. And that has become a very, very successful case study, a very, very successful documentary, which if you have time, you can go and see in YouTube. It is the source of many famous and very well-received documentaries. Scope, individual level, team level, and organization level. So now we come to basically the meat of the talk. Sorry, my dear vegetarian friends, I'm vegetarian too, but somehow it makes easier when we say the meat of the talk. Anyway, the methods and the tools to cultivate mindfulness are, you can do the breath awareness. And for breath awareness, you can do things like a yoga. Don't ask me to do yoga. In my very, very long life and this age, I have tried yoga for the last 20 years. Every time I give up after 1 week. Folks, yoga is not for me. So if it is for you, I really applaud you and I really salute you. But I'm just throwing out one as given as a positive, one of the ways by which you can cultivate breath awareness. Mindfulness-based stress reduction programs. It's something what Professor Jon Kabat-Zinn has done. Professor Daniel Goleman. All these are very big names in social psychology. They have done and they're doing it very successfully. Meditation apps. These apps are called things like 10% happier, calm, and so on. So these apps, if you have your smartphone, you can download these apps. I think there is some kind of a subscription fee. So every now and then you can, program your app so that it tells you. For example, if I had an app, it will tell me right now, Hema, you are talking too much. Hema, you're talking too fast. This is exactly what my app would tell me right now, just to control and to apply brakes on my talk. So this is what an app can do, but there are dangers with apps too. So it helps you if you want to improve your practice of mindfulness. Going back to social and cognitive psychology, it can help you to change your thinking patterns. And again, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, body scanning is something which, Jon Kabat-Zinn does. It's one of the best received YouTube segments. 45 minutes. It's called Body Scan, Jon Kabat-Zinn. If you're tired, you can just lie down. If you're suffering from insomnia, it is the best thing to lie down, lights off, and then switch on this little 40-minute of this Jon Kabat-Zinn's body scan meditation. He just basically, as the word says, he asks you to close your eyes and then go over all the body parts, relax your toes, relax your legs, relax your knees, and so on. I've been suffering from insomnia for many decades, and I have to say that this is one of the things which has really helped me. Guided retreats, laboratories, these are other ways you can change your thinking, meaning you don't have to have this bad thought, oh, I cannot sleep at all. Oh my gosh, I cannot sleep. And the more you think, the more you cannot sleep. This body scan helps you to take that attention away from, oh my gosh, I cannot sleep, to let me focus on the toes. Agreed, my thought will again wander, but even 1 second, if I'm able to focus on my toe and on my knee, it's a success. That is what they say mindfulness is about. It's not the 45 minutes that you're focused, it's that 1 second you can focus. If you cannot focus for 44.5 minutes out of 45, it's completely okay. You're not the loser. You won because out of the 45 minutes, for 1 second you were mindful. That is how you measure mindfulness success. So just a summary of some of the things you could do at the workplace. And I will just take some of these points because it's a big list and each one is quite complex. I will just choose on the right-hand side, I'll just choose something which has worked for me. Everything is important because I'll come back to 1 or 2 later. Slow walking in nature to monitor the sensory stimuli. As human beings, most of us, whatever be our status in life, most of us at least, are blessed with the five sensory, like our sensory feelings. Most of us, we can see, we can hear, we can speak, we can taste, and we can feel. Every time you set out on a walk, if you just tell yourself, when I'm walking today, I'm just going to focus on the trees. I'm going to focus on maybe what animals and birds are there. Maybe it's a squirrel, maybe it's a bird. Try to do that. That is something you can try to improve your mindfulness practice. Then after doing that for 2-3 minutes, and again, you will forget. I guarantee if you set out to look at all the trees, the next second, in a few seconds, you go back to, oh, I have to go and get this work done. Oh, this is something which happened yesterday. I need to address this problem. It is okay. The more we practice, the better we get. So let's not criticize ourselves for failing at mindfulness, but let us, congratulate ourselves. Even for that 1 second, if I'm able to look outside and look at the tree, I'm succeeding. Then you do similarly with the other sensory organs. The next few minutes, you can, try to listen, are there any birds which are chirping? Is that, wind blowing? Are some, is the dog barking? Are children playing? Try to, every time move to one sensory organ after the other when you're walking. And please walk slowly and don't walk with anybody. Walking with somebody is a different thing. It's a social walking. I am now explaining what we need to do for mindful walking. Mindful walking, we have to walk on our own. That is really important, because it also helps the next 2-3 points here. When you're walking mindfully, preferably without your smartphone, you're also doing the digital detox for a very short period. So that are multiple benefits with slow walking. Number 3 benefit with the slow walking, and especially when you don't have your smartphone with you, that time when you're only focusing on what you're seeing, what you're hearing, you're practicing moments of stillness. And to some extent, you're actually even not doing any multitasking. The brain is multitasking, agreed. You're still thinking about the report which needs to be finished, the child who has to be taught, because everybody's taking classes at home now. Many things are there in your head, agreed. But that time when you're walking, at least the body is not multitasking. The body is at least doing only walking, which is a good thing. So many of the things that you want to do to cultivate mindfulness, which you can apply at the workplace, comes back to the slow walking. Try to do that, folks, if you're not already doing that, and you will start seeing some significant improvements. So going back to the previous list of the workplace strategies, I mentioned about the slow walking. There's one more point I want to mention, which is really what is a significant problem that leaders face. One of the biggest problems that leaders have faced is they don't sign up to become a lifelong student of deep listening. There is a very famous Vietnamese monk who mentions that one of the main problems that the world is facing and that companies are facing is that we do not want to listen. And it is one of the most difficult things to do, he says. He says the ultimate sign of respect, if you want to show that you are respecting another individual at the workplace or even in your family setting, if you can keep quiet and just try to listen to what your maybe spouse is saying, or your child is saying, or your sibling is saying, your parent is saying, your colleague is saying, your friend is saying, that's the highest level of respect that you can give to another individual. If you can just listen to that other individual. Number 1, it ranks in terms of bestowing respect on another individual. Second, listening is the same thing as not talking. If you can become a lifelong student of choosing when to talk, most of our problems can be avoided. And there is a wonderful checklist that Joseph Goldstein, whose silent retreats I have had the pleasure of attending, talks about in every single talk he has given. He says we need to become a lifelong student of choosing when to talk. And he goes on to give a lovely checklist. And he says, before we open our mouths, can we just be mindful and ask this particular question? What I'm about to say right now, is it true? Second, what I'm about to say right now, is it gossip free? Is it slander free? 3, what I'm about to say right now, is it said in a very kind and compassionate tone rather than a harsh tone? 4, should I even say this thing right now? Is it timely? Is this the time to be saying this that I plan to say? And last, is it even necessary? Joseph Goldstein goes on to, he has a lovely, when he talks about this talking checklist, he says most of what we talk in life is that last category, totally unnecessary talk. We all suffer from verbal diarrhea. And I have to say that in the 3 decades I have lived in the United States, the number of meetings that I have attended, if you look at really anything valuable, very little of it is really valuable. Most of it is really unnecessary talk. And if we can do these 2 things, compassionate listening and choosing when to talk, it is the best way to practice mindfulness. This is just, I won't go into all these details now. As a leader, how do you implement it in the workforce? It's all very good on screen, it's looking great. I said all these things, but imagine at the workplace, it's not going to be easy to implement. So where do we start? We start in the middle column, okay? We start in the middle column where it says it's the top management team level. The leader makes a significant effort and investment in making sure that there is implementation, mindfulness is implemented across the organization. I'm going to choose just one little, 2 or 3 things from that middle column. The leader has got to articulate his or her personal mission and has got to be a servant leader. Without being a servant leader, without being in that organization to serve others, think of yourself as a servant, not as a dictator. Only then you can really establish mindfulness in your organization. And once you're able to do that, if you're able to display, you're the servant for the organization, you are the servant for others, right? With your strong character, by honoring everybody in the room and by placing common interest first, it starts over there. Then go to the left side of the column. If you are in a position to establish resources in the organization, so that others can also be, practicing mindfulness in a very, very nurturing environment, then that's a great thing. Make sure that you do that. Another thing you can do on the left-hand side column, start very small. Start at your level and see who are the people who are willing to adopt this kind of a practice. Don't force it on everybody. Please, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. So start small, start voluntary, get those early adopters, as we say in our marketing discipline, right? When you have a new product or a service, we like those early adopters of your product or service because it's from them that they learn, that we learn. So that is very important. That's an important criteria. And once you go to that left side, go to that extreme right side column. At that individual basis, some of the things we can do is, as we mentioned earlier, integrating in the daily activities, mindful walking, mindful lunch break, and so on. So you can start a daily journal. I have been keeping a daily journal for 7 years. That has really helped me. And separating the professional and the personal lives is absolutely critical. We never, and unfortunately, in today's environment, with the more we have social media, the more we've gone digital. Our work is with us in our head for 24 hours now. 24 hours. And you're all sitting here on a Friday evening in India when it is about 6:30 p.m., which should be the time for you to relax, not to be attending some webinar. You should be relaxing, taking a walk with family members or on your own, or just relaxing. And here you are sitting in a webinar. So please separate your professional and your personal lives. Extremely important for mindfulness. So this one, and I'll come back to some of the points later. So two things I want to summarize from this slide. Everything is equally important because I want to tie this in with the strategic leadership I mentioned. Character. Character is always important, folks, always. Without character, there is no leadership, there is no competitive advantage, there is no mindfulness, there is no meditation practice. Second, in the organization, make sure you are setting aside resources, human resources to get some good teachers to train your people. Then you have got material resources, a nice meditation room, a meditation space, and so on. Financial resources, give your people time off, let them participate in retreats, let them go for mindfulness seminars, fully paid, let them take time off so that they can separate their personal professional life. This all costs money. Make sure you're setting aside that financial resource. Intangible resource. Make sure you are establishing that great culture in your organization of trust. It's okay for you to tell your folks that I don't know. If somebody asks us a question, we should be comfortable enough as a leader and as a participant in a team, whatever be the level we are in our organization, to be very frank and say, sorry, I don't know. It is, so this, we have to set aside our ego. It doesn't matter. We may be at the highest levels of the organization. We may be the head of a state. We may be the prime minister of a country or the president of a country, but we don't know everything. And if somebody asks us, we have got to feel, comfortable enough to say, I don't know. So roadmap for implementation. So I said many things now the last 1 hour. So let me go through some, like a roadmap as to how to implement it in the workplace. I'll start with stage 1, simple tips. Second stage will be how to deepen the practice. And of course, the third one is called the aspirational goals. Stage 1, simple tips. In United States, we call stage 1 simple tips as a low-hanging fruit, which means the tree is out there laden with some really ripe fruits. I don't have to put any effort. I just have to raise my arm and pluck this lovely fruit. It's that easy. So that is why it is called a low-hanging fruit, where I don't have to put any effort in getting that fruit. So this is stage 1 for mindfulness, simple tips. The easiest things, folks, we can do because we were born like that. Every spiritual text or every, I hope you can see me because suddenly there seems to be a, Sushma, I'm going to take a little 1 second break to ask if you can hear me.
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah, we can hear you, ma'am. Yeah.
You are audible and you are visible.
Oh, great. Oh, thank you. And but you can see my screen as well, right? My PowerPoint file.
Yes.
I can see it. I can see it very well. I can see it very well.
Thank you, Professor. So going back to the stage 1 simple tips, generosity and gratitude. Friends, every text I have read, every philosophical or spiritual book I have read, it starts and ends with generosity and gratitude. I have a wonderful friend, my high school friend in India. Last year, she retired after a very successful career, decades and decades. She was in Bombay, Mumbai as we call it now, and she retired. And I kept with her, last many years with Facebook. I was able to see what she was doing. It was unbelievable how much I learned from her long distance. I have not seen her for decades, but how much I have learned from her team, because her Facebook, when she was in such a senior position in the organization, she excelled in generosity. She excelled in generosity. Whenever it was any colleague or a person who was reporting to her, she was in a very high position. So she had a very large team with a lot of direct reports. Whenever it was a colleague, whose daughter or son succeeded in getting into some, like university, or did very well in school, or whether it was athletics or something else, the kind of, like events she would arrange for these individuals was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And she was also, and now in her, in her first year after retirement, she's also a great artist. She's very good with her hands. So she used that skill even when she was an employee in that particular company to, like to organize the parties herself. She did not delegate and say, hey, you do this, I do that, and I take credit because I'm such a great leader. You would plan and implement these surprise parties for all these folks just to remember them on their special occasions, and with her thank you notes and all the things she arranged. It was like, I've never seen any individual to that extent as she did. And, and I saw that in the Facebook. And I also saw that when she was undergoing some personal challenges, everything, her life was an open book and still is an open book. And I can see that in Facebook. And I have learned so much from this person. And the last time I saw her was when we graduated high school in New Delhi. Can you imagine how many decades have gone by? And when I think of her, I just have this warm feeling, generosity, and it's available for all of us. We have to set our ego aside. We have to start thanking individuals. Today I am here in front of you. It's only because everybody who has helped me to get here. Have I done anything for them? The answer is zero. The day we start, thinking that I will be generous only because I expect somebody to do something for me in return, our life has become totally meaningless. Totally, totally meaningless. And all of you who are in such a, like an early stage of a career, start practicing now. It is free. Little thank you notes. And today we can do it via email. A nice, a generous, a sincere thank you note goes a very, very long way. It is like planting seeds. You plant those seeds and you water these seeds. And then over a period of time, they mature into those great trees, which give us this low-hanging fruit. It is perpetual process. It's a perpetual process. So please be generous. I'm sure you all are very generous, but every morning you get up, you have to tell yourself, today I am going to take special effort in, in making sure that I'm thanking some individuals for whatever they did. Even if they did something like 10 years ago, you can think about, thanking them today. It's okay. It's never too late. Gratitude, because we are here because of the individuals who placed us here. Otherwise, there's no way we are here. We are here only because of other individuals. And at the same time, every time we can think of it, we have to get back at this core of all our beings. It's our breath. Every time, just sit, relax, just focus on your breathing. Even if you can breathe one little breath, you're being mindful. That's all it takes, folks. One breath at a time. Not sitting for 20 minutes and trying to empty your head of thoughts. Impossible. One breath at a time. That's all it takes. Which gives you to point number 3, practicing moments of silence. All this is the low-hanging fruit. As I mentioned earlier, a couple of slides ago, every 1 or 2 hours, you've got to take a break. Ellen Langer, the mother of, mindfulness in the management literature, calls it the second wind. She calls it the latent energy. However old we are, however stale we are in our career, we always get a fresh energy, which comes only if every few hours we are able to take ourselves outside our desk and our smartphone and go away for a nice little, 1 or 2 silent or a brisk walk, slow or a brisk walk. It is called, think about, like suppose you go home, you have had a very long day, you're really, really tired, 7 p.m. it's the end of the week, Friday evening, or I don't know when your work week starts, maybe it never ends, you're extremely tired. The child comes and says, dad or mom, can you do this? Or mom or dad comes and says, hey, can you do this? You cannot do anything. And suddenly, a friend from 12 years ago, let's say, you've not seen this friend at all, and is now contacting you via WhatsApp or whatever and says, hey, I'm in town. You've not seen this person for 12 years. This person is in town. and the person says, can we meet in this restaurant, which is about 3 or 4 miles from where you live? Can you come and have for maybe for a cup of coffee? I guarantee most of us suddenly have this energy. Here we are, we rush and we meet this friend from more than 12, this close friend from more than 12 years ago. Where did we get this energy? We had zero energy at 7 p.m., right, to do any of the other things, chores. But suddenly we got this energy to do that. Langer says we can have that same type of energy even to approach our day-to-day problems. But all it takes is we have to take ourselves outside of that location, go somewhere, even if it is just to the next room. Go to the room, maybe you're not these days, we are all working remote, but go to your friend's room, call the cubicle rather, or wherever the friend is working. Maybe, stand there, you can chat with this person. Or if you're on Zoom, unfortunately that is hard, put your computer down, just go outside and take a little walk or do something else. Or, if you like gardening, you can go and see maybe whether your plant is, functioning well. Maybe you want to water your plant, do something you like. Don't do something which is even more difficult. Then it is not going to give you the second energy. So this is something you can do. It is called that second energy. Every few hours, take 2 to 4 minutes for a little break, which also gives you opportunity to shut down your technology. One thing I've learned is the daily reflection, the daily journal. If you can maintain a daily journal, I've been doing that for 7 years. What I note down in my journal is, generosity, have I been a nice, generous person today? Have I, expressed my thanks just to be alive, that I woke up this morning, I'm alive, family members are doing well, colleagues, friends are all doing well, so far so good. And that I woke up in a free country. I cannot stress enough how important it is that we are all, living in countries which are, democracies, really. So that itself is a great blessing. So let's think about these things, and if we can record it in our daily journal, that will be a good start for mindfulness. Simple tips. Some other things you can do, for simple tips, with simple stretching exercises. Whenever your mind is, little bit free, try to focus on your breathing. You can get back to the breathing. Simple stretching exercises you can do is every few hours, you can just lift your hands above your head. That's all. It's not yoga. I'm right now sitting, actually. I'm sitting cross-legged on my carpet, and I'm just lifting my hand up because I've sat for more than an hour. And as you're lifting your hands, all you need to do is try to focus on the breathing at that time. If you can hold your hand up, depending on your health condition, for a few seconds, and when you're holding your hand up like that, lifting your arms and crossing your palms, just for a few seconds, you're actually being mindful. That's one tiny exercise. The other exercise you can do is, most of us, when we are doing very, very busy work, or very like a work where we are applying our full brain power, sometimes our fist can be clenched. Our palms are closed, compressed. So we are actually, because we are focusing so deeply, if we are doing that, you can take a break and just relax your palms and spread your palms. There is another very good, mindfulness teacher called, Dr. Ali, and he's got a mindfulness institute. I had the pleasure of attending his online workshop last year. He had so many sessions over a 10-day period. He calls this like the lizard approach. The lizard, the lizard we have, which goes on the wall and all that. In India, especially, lizards are quite common olden days. I don't know now. So you just spread your palm. That's all you do. Like a lizard climbs up the wall, you just take your clenched fists and you just open it up and spread it. Do that 4 or 5 times. Whenever you think about it, when you're aware of it, that will get you into mindfulness. The third practice you can do is something which our Qigong teacher has taught us. It comes from the ancient Chinese practice. Every now and then, take your 2 arms and just rub it vigorously like that, like this. As you can, I think you can hear me. All I'm doing is I'm taking my 2 palms and just rubbing. How long do you rub? You rub your palms till they become sort of warm, right? You do get that warm feeling. And what my teacher has taught me is that you have to keep doing Even after it gets boring. See, I did this for about 10 seconds. My upper arm is already hurting. I'm at that age in my life where it's not that easy. This thing, even small thing like this can hurt, but do it. It doesn't matter. So please keep rubbing your palms, even if you are, till they become really warm and it becomes very boring. So what the teacher says is, the success is not that you just rub for a few seconds, but can you continue this rubbing till you get so bored and say, I don't want to do this. Until that stage, keep rubbing. That's all you need to do. You're sitting at your desk, nobody will bother you, right? So these 3 physical tips are all stage 1 to practice mindfulness. Free, totally free, can be done at the desk, sitting. That's how you break yourself away from, and then get into, that second wind, and then tap into your latent energy. Stage number 2 is, as if once you are able to go beyond stage 1, stage 2, what you could do is, if you are comfortable, you could maybe start like an awareness meditation or a concentration meditation. Awareness meditation is a tool for mindfulness. Concentration meditation is not. When you get into concentration meditation, you are actually getting into a very, very complex field. That's really meditation. That is beyond mindfulness. That can be tough. So you can decide what you want to do. If you want to do, try to sit, and just do awareness meditation. Awareness meditation is mindfulness. Let's just watch the thoughts come and go. You sit there the first 2 minutes, it's just what you did the previous hour that's going in through your head. Let it go, just don't keep holding on to it. Let it go. Next, another thought is coming. That thought is also going. So thoughts are coming and going, and you're sitting, and you don't worry, don't judge yourself. You've done that. That's called awareness meditation, a tool for mindfulness. But more experienced people can get into concentration meditation, where actually you're trying to focus on your breathing. Every time, your mind is wandering, you have to pull it back into your breathing. Professor, S.N. Goenka ji, he was one of the classic meditation mindfulness teachers who came from Burma to India many decades ago. And he started Vipassana retreats in India first, which was just spread all over the world. And he says you've got to focus on the breathing. So for him, it is all about going back to the breathing. And if you sit for 30 minutes and you were able to focus on the breathing only for 1 second, you have succeeded. That 1 second is success. That's all you need to think about. Don't have to say, oh, my 29 minutes and 59 seconds, my thoughts were all over. Never judge yourself. Never criticize yourself. Second thing you can do as a manager, start and end meetings. Can you do that with 1 minute of silence? I tried doing that. Disaster. Totally disaster. It was absolutely a total failure. So I asked one of my meditation teachers, now I'm taking online classes, many months ago. I said, I read all these books, attended all these retreats, watched all these YouTube segments. Everybody says, why don't you start a meeting with 1 minute of silence? How come when I tried to do that, the participants who were at the meeting started feeling very uncomfortable, jittery, fidgety? What did I do wrong? So this meditation teacher, Leslie Mott, said that what we can do to really implement this starting a meeting with the 1 minute of silence is give the participants something to do. This is what Mingyur Rinpoche, who's another very famous Buddhist monk and Tibetan monk, and he is a hilarious and a very entertaining speaker as well. He's so funny. Just thinking about him brings a smile to my face. He calls it the monkey mind. He says we all have a monkey mind which is constantly running from here and there, tree to tree, branch to branch. We are not able to train this mind, monkey. He says don't get rid of the monkey. Make the monkey your friend. That means make your mind a friend and give the monkey something to do. Give it a job, he says. If the monkey has a good job to do, the mind that is, then, you can practice mindfulness. So what I did we can do with all this monkey mind is, If we can give ourselves and all the participants something to do, everybody actually will get a benefit. So that minute of silence when you're asking your teammates to do, you can say, okay, we are starting the meeting today. Let's start with a minute of silence. But in that this minute, focus and see how much you can breathe. So start counting the breathing. So ask the participants to sit and just to count their breathing. My hunch is that if out of the 100% participants, at least 50-60% will do that. Earlier, nobody did that. Everybody became very fidgety and agitated because they didn't know what that 1 minute is. Very, very long. You want to go back and look at your smartphone to see how many messages you have missed. But if you're given, we all are given something to do for that minute, as we say, to train our mind, and we ask our participants to count the breathing. And then you can time, and then you can say, okay, now that we are breathing and we are relaxed, let's start our meeting with this agenda. 50-60% are focused on their breathing and they try to count the breathing. It's a good start at least. And if not for them, at least it's good for us who we are running the meeting. And soon it can start spreading in your organization. Communication is an extremely important point mentioned way back when we started the webinar this evening. And we always have to keep working on this, listening, writing, and the speaking skills. And all of you in your career, like in social media, you can record about your work experiences, your career experiences. Your experience is unique. And that is why you are a teacher. Everybody is a teacher because our experience is unique. So go to social media, write about your experience so that other people can learn from your experience. As long as you're not sharing any confidential organizational matters or issues, it is, you really have to do that. And I started using LinkedIn as a medium for writing 7 years ago. This is not my research papers. That's all the dry papers where we are not interested. We publish for the sake of publishing. But LinkedIn is a very good, area where you can start writing. And once I started becoming comfortable in LinkedIn in 2013, I was able to switch to newspapers. So whenever I used to visit India, I was able to write in the newspapers because this comes from our own lack of confidence because we think we cannot do things well. Don't ever do that. Once you start a mindfulness practice, you'll have much more confidence in yourself too. So start, writing and then start speaking. If you get a speaking opportunity, please take that opportunity. Please, because we are all, every day we are all learning, and it will really help you to reflect and to be mindful. And of course, what you can do is to join a support group of meditation practitioners. If you're in the middle or the later stages of your career, you can also start volunteering for a non-profit organization. Because we are running out of time, I don't want to get into this, but I did join a non-profit board a couple of years ago, and it has helped me to improve my listening skills, my empathy, my emotional quotient, many of these other things. You may consider that as well. Stage 3, as this stage becomes more complex, you can make it a habit, your daily meditation. And as I mentioned earlier, you do have to establish all the resources for mindfulness in your institution and create a non-threatening environment so that everybody can feel comfortable in practicing mindfulness. Assessing mindfulness becomes important once you get to the second and the third stage. If you are a leader and for your team or for your organization, start establishing targets for mindfulness. You can establish targets for yourself. At the individual level, you can say, today, at the end of the day, you can think about your day. Remember to thank 2 or 3 individuals. Then have I been very generous, and have I been generous today? Generous can be anything. Generous with your time, generous with your talent. It can be anything, So have I been generous, and so on. Just ask yourself these little checklists, these questions. And then you can, about the team also, like, in terms of conflict management and things like that, you can ask yourself whether you've set aside a nurturing environment, so that your teams are having a good experience. And that can be done if you start to listen very well and then allow your team to speak. So that way you can provide a good checklist for assessing mindfulness. There are lots of mindfulness scales available, lots. So I don't want to get into that. But if you're interested, I'll be happy to send you the links to all these questionnaires, which can assess our mindfulness progress once we start and continue this practice. So Sushma, we are ready for a breakout session now.
Okay. Ma'am, we have 80 participants? Should I make 10 in a thing, or how many, ma'am, in a group?
Because I wanted to have it as a small, I wanted people to get a, like an opportunity to speak. So if there are 80 participants, how many rooms can you organize, Sushma?
Oh, ma'am, there is no restriction, ma'am. We can do like 10 per room or anything. We can do like around 9 or 10, anything. Now 77 are there. 75.
Okay, 77. Okay, we can do 10 a room, meaning then should we make it just 1 minute for each speaker? Because there'll be lots of, like, in fact, Professor Ravi Kumar, if you're still there, I would like to take, you're experienced, and I am just, like an observer, as I mentioned. How do you suggest I do this? Because I didn't realize there'll be so many participants, which is a great thing. Because I thought it was going to be a smaller group.
There's more than one way of doing. The easiest way is ask people who would like to be part of the breakaway groups.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And among those people who come, just divide by 8 into 8 or maximum 9. Don't make it 10. Make it the largest single digit.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. So
for example, I'm volunteering that I'll be outside the room.
Okay, you'll be outside the group. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so Sushma, like a professor has given a great suggestion. So whoever wants to be in the breakout group or in the room, like they can be in the breakout session, and we can give 2 minutes for each speaker within the breakout room. And then after each speaker has had maybe 2 minutes of general discussion within the group, and they can come back to the main session group. Is that okay?
Okay, ma'am. Okay, yeah.
So will you be setting the rooms?
Yeah, I'm just doing it. Yeah. So now we have 64. So I'll make it around 5 or 6 rooms. Okay.
Sushma, 8 people in each room, 8 rooms, 64. I hope my math is right.
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah, sir. Yeah, sir. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Sushma, and is it okay? The time thing, is the time all right? Is it okay if this takes 20 minutes after we do will that be okay with everybody, Sushma?
I hope, I think, yeah, ma'am. People are saying I'm in the chat, so I can see, yeah.
Wonderful. Because if we give 2 minutes for each speaker in a breakout room, that will be 16 minutes, right?
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah.
So then what we can do is, no, let's not do this then. Return. Okay. So let's not do the general discussion within their team. Okay. So Professor, is this okay that after 2 minutes for each speaker in the breakout room, and they can return to the main room? Is that okay? Yeah. So Sushma, is this how you will set it? That will you be telling the speaker, first speaker is done, let's go to speaker number 2? Is that how you will set it, or should we type the question there?
I think we should type it there, ma'am. I haven't done so far, so we can. You can do as you suggest. Yeah.
Hema?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I see only say about 10 people saying I'm in.
Okay, then so I think we can skip it, right? I think people may be uncomfortable. Yes, we can skip it. Thank you. Yes. So play from current slide. So Sushma.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, Professor, thank you. And friends.
Instead, in addition to that, instead you can take a Q&A if possible.
Yeah, let's do Q&A. Yes, thank you, Professor.
Let them speak, whatever.
Yeah, thank you. Professor, thank you for the excellent suggestion. And Sushma, sorry that I caused the interruption.
No, ma'am, it's okay. Now I just closed it. Now the breakout room. Yeah.
Now, before I get to that, we get to the Q&A. So my friends who are still, who are still in this particular session, you could do this because you're all very comfortable with Zoom, having used it for this almost this whole year. You can please, if you're in your workplace setting, you can try it with your Zoom, with your friends, with your teammates, because you'll be working with much smaller teams. You can try breakout sessions with your teammates. It's a very, very powerful tool, So please try to do that, at least in your own workplace settings, okay? Yeah. I think I will go beyond this into timeline because this is a 7-year process. So right now in the 2020, In the last 9 months, I have signed up for I'm in an online session, which is offered out of Garrison, New York. And by the way, that's a free online, it is offered every day in the US time, 12 noon to 1 p.m. And I'll be happy to give this link to anybody, even in India, because 12 p.m. Here is 10:30 p.m. for you. It meets on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Wonderful. Those teachers are outstanding. And there's nothing better than having your free workshop, to cultivate mindfulness. I'll be happy to send the Garrison Institute link to anybody who's interested, who wants to join in for these online meditation sessions. And especially with the listening skills, the communication skills, how to work in breakout rooms, par excellence, free. So in India time, it will be 10:30 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And 2018, I did a Vipassana retreat at that place, a 4-day retreat, very useful. Okay, so I just want to get to the Q&A, and I have seen benefits on the personal front. I've seen, I think my physical health has really improved, I've got to say, in the last 5 years. My BP is under control, and I'm not going to the doctor as often as I used to go. Mental health, I'm definitely able to, on my career front, I have made major progress in saying these are the things I need not do, I should not do, and these are things I can continue to do. Emotional health, my son told me, my son said I've become a very good listener. So that's how I measured my progress. My next goals to practice silence and compassionate listening. These are challenges I'll be happy to share with you later. There's one word only I want to pick on. It's called the ego. If we have an ego, it's a total failure, total failure. So friends, anybody who's interested in implementing mindfulness, either at our personal level or at our team or institutional level, just shed that ego, work on it. It takes time. Work on it, please. But with the ego, we cannot function. Okay. So at this stage, I'm going to take the Q&A, and I have to say that, I'm thankful to all the meditation teachers, all these decades, and even my dad, my late father, and he didn't know he was doing mindfulness, but he was a great in mindfulness. So teachers who are trained and not trained, everybody, my meditation teachers, for showing me the path, and all the, and I have to thank Professor Ravi Kumar. And here I want to mention, before getting to the Q&A stage, I was in Professor Ravi Kumar's 2 of his classes. In 1988, I took my second class I took with Professor Ravi Kumar was called Personal Growth Laboratory. I didn't know anything about human behavior, and all those things with which I started my talk this evening. It was a small class. It was actually it was about and one of the main concepts Professor introduced was called the Johari window. The Johari window is something which is the root of our emotional intelligence, empathy, and so on. Quickly, Professor, and please, and if I'm wrong, Professor will correct me. It says we all have 4 selves in our mind. We have our open self. Today, what you see is my open self. And then there is also something called a blind self. Friends, what you are seeing is something you see, but you don't see I don't see though. I'm having some major issues in my own personality, which I don't know. That's my blind self. But you folks who are sitting on the other side of the computer, you can see, that is, I'm blind to it. Then there is the hidden self, something that I know about myself, but, I keep it shut from the rest of the world. And then the last is the dark self, which neither I know or anybody else knows, that which I have in my own mind. So what I learned in that wonderful class is that, to the extent possible, mindfulness and all these laboratories, the retreats, and these practice can help us to expand our open self, right? We are never going to get rid of the quadrant, those 4 things in ourselves. But to the extent possible, can we expand our open self? That is really the ultimate purpose. And it is so much related to mindfulness. And I am so blessed that the teacher who taught me this 32 years ago is today here in this webinar. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you to my wonderful students, my MBA students, who have taken, this early morning, to attend this particular talk. Thank you to the great colleagues, my friends, and everybody. And I have got to thank the internet. Some of the images, the birds, they are mine, but the rest, I have copied shamelessly from the internet, without acknowledging who those people were. I myself did not know. And last but not the least, you great participants who have set aside your Friday evening when you could be doing other better things to just sit and listen to me for 90 minutes. Thank you. Sushma? Any questions?
Yes. Yeah.
So how do you want me to address the questions? Will somebody unmute and then ask the question, please?
Yeah, ma'am. Actually, they can do that, or they can type in a chat window also.
Yeah. Okay. The chat is, okay. Would anybody be comfortable? Okay. Ego. Quickly, I'm saying.
Ma'am, I will read you out the questions on the chat window, which has already been posted.
Yeah, I'm reading. Yeah, Sushma. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, 1 second. So, question is from Mr. Lokesh. So he's asking, what are the tools and techniques to subdue mind and intelligence?
That's an excellent question. Excellent question. The first thing I would like to share with you is, we don't have to subdue our intelligence. I mean, is that, if I understand correctly, if that was the word used, we don't have to subdue our intelligence at all. In fact, the more and more with our mindfulness practice, our intelligence will shine. Friends, hello?
Ma'am, someone is on this. He's talking. I'll unmute him. 1 second. Mute him.
Yeah. With regard to subduing the mind, that question is a very important way to subdue the mind. We don't have to subdue the mind at all. Unless we are getting heavy duty into concentration meditation, mantra meditation. Remember, if you remember, one of my earlier slides was what mindfulness is not, and I had a blank slide. I had a total blank slide. Mindfulness is not a blank slide. It is not subduing our mind. Don't even try to subdue your mind. It can be very dangerous. Like after I went on the Vipassana retreat in 2018, it was a 4-day silent retreat. I did a big mistake. I came back, and every evening I would sit for 1 hour and force myself to force on the breathing. So every time I would try to breathe, and every second my mind is wandered off, I would try to force that mind back into the breathing, and I would try to sit for 1 hour. After a few weeks, my right ear became so hot. I started getting ear infections. Friends, I'm not joking. It can be, meditation can be quite dangerous if we do it, like overdo it, or we force ourselves. I started getting serious ear infections just on my right ear. And then I asked my meditation teacher. I do have a meditation teacher who moved away from the city. He said, Hema, you're forcing. Don't ever force. So going back to the question, sir, you raised, don't empty your mind. Don't empty your intellect. Just do the little exercises. Just try to walk. Just look at just look at the tree, look at something which is nice, pleasing, look at the sky. If the sky is blue, it's nice. If the sky is cloudy, also it is nice. Just look at those things, the sensory organs, looking, hearing, and so on. That should be enough. Don't try to shut the mind. Thank you.
Ma'am, there are a few more questions. So this is from Srinivasu. So how do we define ego, and what are the thin limits?
Excellent question. Excellent question. How do you define an ego? Is the more and more we start saying I, the more and more we say I, me, mine, that is how we start measuring ego. Because it starts with the way we classify ourselves and our work and so on. When we start saying these things more and more, it starts showing up in our action. If we start thinking about the I, the me, and the mine, it will show up in the speech, it will show up in the action. How you can so this is how we can measure ego. So how you can measure an ego is try to reduce that ego is in the team settings, shift the praise to, you did a great job. Tell the teammates, you did a great job. The organization did a great job. You did. So if we start shifting the praise from our end to the end of your team or to your institution, it is a very good start. But if things go wrong, this is where I want to emphasize, sir, ma'am, when things go wrong, we have to take the blame. That is when it's an I. So it is double-sided here. The praise and saying nice things, showering praise is to the other individual, to your team, to your institution. Taking the blame is me. So if you work on these two ends, definitely over a period of time, it can improve. But for a human being, it is quite hard. It is very hard. Don't criticize yourself. Number 3, please don't criticize yourself or judge yourself. It is okay. It's completely okay. It is a human thing. It is a human thing to have ego. And that is what separates us from the other birds and the animals and something else. Don't worry. 3 things. Praise others. If there is a blame to be taken, take the blame yourself, and so that can help you a lot. Thank you.
Ma'am, so the next question is from Vijay Kumar. What are the KPIs for measuring the mindfulness as a manager?
Excellent question. How do you measure mindfulness for a manager? The first thing, the metric is you want to ask for this mindfulness, whom are you measuring for? Are you measuring for the individual, the person who's the manager? Are you measuring the mindfulness for the team which that manager is managing? Number 3, are you measuring the mindfulness for the institution where you are a manager? Let us start with the metric and measuring mindfulness for the manager, individual level. Without the individual level, it can never go into the team level, never cascade into the organization level. The manager level, to measure your mindfulness, as you can start these little practices of maintaining a daily journal, trying to praise others, trying to feel grateful for what we have in life. You can start doing that just in terms of your emails or handwritten notes. At the end of the year, let us say that you've given yourself 1 year to measure your mindfulness, how far you have come along. Compared to the year 2020, in the year 2021, at the end of the year 2021, please, if you maintain in a logbook, a journal, it will be excellent. Examine your progress in 2021, the year which has gone by. Have you thanked many more people this year, which is just starting, compared to the people you thanked in the previous year? Number 2, have you felt grateful for the many things you have in your life? The fact that you are a manager is itself something to be very thankful for, very thankful. Do we record that in our journal? That I started the day healthy, I'm in a good job, and so on. So that is a daily recordings for you. Number 2. Number 3, in terms of meeting the team agendas, this is where it gets from your individual level to how you are as a manager in your team. Have you had more productive meetings? That's the question you can ask. Let's face it, most of the team meetings are going away in chit chat. It's very hard to be agenda focused. Have you started your meetings, the meetings which you are in charge, by starting with that 1 minute of asking people to focus on their breathing? Were you bold enough to do that? I know it's hard to do it because you don't want to be seen as somebody very silly and frivolous type of a person. But if you're bold enough to do that, that's good. This is how you can measure progress, right? Gratitude, how much you have come along the year. Generosity, how much you have come along in the year. How you're conducting your meetings, how you've come along in the year. And if you have, this is where the ego also enters the picture. I don't know whether teams evaluate the managers also. We call it the 360-degree appraisal. Even if your organization is not doing the 360-degree appraisal, ask your teammates to measure your performance on the listening skill, the communication skill, on the conflict management skill. Are we bold enough to ask our team members to measure our performance? That will be an excellent way to measure your mindfulness. I'm lucky enough to be in an educational institution where students measure our progress. So every semester we have student evaluations and we get very good and candid feedback, what we did well, how we need to improve. Agreed, it is not on mindfulness, but even if a student tells me, Hema keeps on talking, Hema never listens to us, she's always about her opinion and does not embrace the opinion of the other students, that they are giving me insight into my own mindfulness. I hope I've tried to shed some light on how to measure your KPI for metrics for mindfulness. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have... Sushma, you can take over. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Rohini. Ma'am, that was actually my colleague Rohini was reading out the question. Thank you, Rohini.
Yeah, thank you, Sushma.
Yeah. Ma'am, actually, we are already almost 1.5 hours. Should we take more questions or what can we do, ma'am?
Sushma, your colleagues have had such a long day. I'm going to leave this to you because it's really it's up to you. For me, my morning has just started. It's only 8:45 a.m. Whole day is ahead of me, but it's not the same for you all. I'm going to leave it to you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to field them for the rest of the day.
That's very nice of you, ma'am. I think let's take one last question from Manisha. She's asking, how could we manage when we are emotionally hurt?
Manisha, that's such an excellent question, and all my life I have struggled with this. As a human being, we get hurt all the time. We get hurt all the time. It can start right at a young age. We can be emotionally hurt in a school setting. Somebody, like who's a best friend, you've had a best friend, I'm talking about the young age, how everything starts. You've been a best friend for 3 or 4 years with another girl. I'm talking because it's a female who asked the question, that's why I'm saying girl. And then suddenly some other new student comes in the school, and immediately your best friend of so many years decides that they are going to have another best friend. You're young at that time, 12, 13 years old, it can happen, and hurt can start over there. And as you proceed in life, you go into college, then you go into higher education, you go into your career, you have your family, your colleagues, you can be hurt every single day. So how do you address that? The first thing to say is, don't blame yourself and ask this question, did I do anything wrong? This is the question one asks. Most of us think when we get really hurt emotionally, many things. One feels a lot of anger. Why did this person do this? Then the person feels a lot of hurt. Maybe I did something wrong. That is why I'm ended up in this situation. Distance yourself, and others from it. This emotional hurt is not something don't look at it as my thing or his thing or her thing. It is just a situation. It is an event. That's all. The more thought we put to that, the more hurt you're going to be. Just like the cloud in the sky, and that is where this mindfulness practice is so essential. If you look at that hurt as something which is a dark cloud on the sky, not as he or she who caused the hurt to me, if you look at that in emotional hurt, whenever it happens in life, it's going to happen all the time. The day we take birth as a human being, give me one individual who has not been emotionally hurt on whatever be the dimension. But if you can start looking at that hurt and put that hurt up in the sky and say, that's a dark cloud, it's not going to be there in my life forever. It will slowly go away. That is, so distance yourself first and say, it is all right to feel it is a dark cloud. And don't judge yourself harshly and say, oh my gosh, I'm feeling this hurt. as Mingyu Rinpoche would say, make it your friend. You can say, that is what I have been taught by all my mindfulness teachers. Because what put them into, why they became meditation and mindfulness teacher? Because they were hurt. Manisha, I've got to say that what set them on this path, not because they were having fantastic lives. Many of them were very deeply hurt at a very young age. And that is how many of these Westerners who took to this Eastern meditation and mindfulness, it started from there. You should read their life stories, which is very, very sad. They became teachers for that reason. And then they found that that was such a wonderful solution and that they were able to really function most effectively. So these are the 2-3 things you can do. It is not your problem. It is not that person's problem too. Nobody caused this problem for you. It is just something like which a cloud, which is there on the sky, and embrace it and say it is okay. So whether you have a pain in the body or a pain in the mind or pain in the heart, whatever it is, just say it is all right. And just, embrace it and say it is okay. Let it live with me, for as long as it wants. I'm not going to keep it with me forever, but I'm just going to allow it to coexist, and soon it will go away. That's all I can say. And Manisha, I will be, if you go to YouTube and if you want to try the John Kabat-Zinn's body scan meditation, and also Joseph Goldstein, he's a wonderful teacher of mindfulness, wonderful teacher. And then Mingyu Rinpoche. These are the 3 people I can think of. And Rinpoche is amazingly funny. He's a Buddhist monk, and don't get carried away by seeing all those saffron robes. He's an amazingly funny teacher. He's very funny. Start looking at these 3 YouTubes. Do it regularly whenever you have time. Whenever you get hurt, that emotional hurt feeling comes and you are free. You're already wasting so much mental energy on feeling hurt. You may as well go and switch on your YouTube. And you can do that on your smartphone. The best thing, we are lucky to be in 2020, November. You can see it on your smartphone. Thank you. I hope it's helpful.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Thank you, ma'am. I think we can see a lot of good messages in the chat. They're all liking the session and they're all thanking you. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Sushma. And anyone wants to get in touch with me, you got my email address. I can put it in the chat, if you want. It's krishnan.hema@yahoo.com. And of course, there is also my office, my Xavier address, which is very easy, krishnan@xavier.edu. Feel free to use any email mode you want, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. That's very nice of you taking your time and taking this session for all of us. And I can see a lot of messages in the chat, a lot of learnings. And I personally, a lot of takeaways for me. And a special thanks to Professor Ravi Kumar for taking this time.
Don't thank me. It is an opportunity. How can I leave it? Oh, come
no,
on.
Sir. Yeah.
Don't make me an outsider to the institute.
Yeah, no, sir. No, I'm just, yeah.
No, I'm so proud of you, Sushma, and your other colleague.
Yes, sir.
Stayed back, and it's very nice.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Thank you so much. You have been a great support to all of us.
Yeah.
Stay in touch. You have my email ID and my mobile.
Absolutely. I will be in touch. And all of you also, please feel free to contact me anytime you want. Although I don't know anything about these topics, I'll be happy to direct your attention, and then put you in touch with the right resource, right? It's a question of getting the right resource. I'll be more than happy to put you all in touch with the right resource, and all of them are free, totally free. Okay? Thank you all. Sushma,
thank you. Thank you.
Sushma, thank you so much. You've taken so much of your time all these weeks.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you to you, your colleagues, and all these lovely participants. Thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of the evening. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you,
ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.